Hi, folks. This is a video that is related to your sample-based hip hop beat assignment. And the purpose of this video is really to walk you through walk you through the mechanics of the software, the Citizen DJ online drum machine sampler. This presumes no knowledge at all about how to use drum machines, how to sample any of that outside of what you've gathered in our course. So, yeah, it's a really fun, creative, interpretive assignment, but the site itself requires just a little bit of familiarity. It's not really any skills you need to learn, and just steps to follow. And so that's really what this video is all about. Come back, refer to it. Hopefully, it answers any lingering questions. So, with that, let me get my screen up here. You'll have uh, this something that looks like this document. I need to do a few edits, but you'll have a link at the very top that you're going to follow that takes you to your sampler. Oh, I had one open already. Pull it down a tad. And okay, so this is, you click that link, it'll take you to this. Now, let's go back to your instructions here. You're going to create a track with 4 different samples, right? Sample 1, look here, sample 1, sample 2, sample 3, and sample 4. Of the excerpt Make Believe. It should that you see that here. So leave this alone. The choose an item to sample, that should already be set up as Make Believe. And you must use all 4 samples, and they must be different from one another, with some overlap being acceptable. Your samples must be triggered a minimum of 7 times, which means you need a minimum of 7 blue blocks or pads populating your beat. So you see right here, there's 5 of them. This is what it sounds like. Okay, I'll play what it preloads and so forth, right? So that's not what you can do, and you're going to manipulate these samples in a different way, but you need at least 7 blocks. You need to use sample 1, sample 2, sample 3, and sample 4, and at least 7 blocks. And you can use more, but at least that. Okay. And then so that's the sample, the blue kind of part. And then there's the drums down here. And that's another component of the assignment. You're going to create your own drum pattern that emulates a specific 1990s hip hop track. Cite that track in your summary, that's talked about below, and how your drum patterns, discuss how your drum pattern fits the sample pattern you constructed with Make Believe. So the relationship between the drums and Make Believe, you know, how they sound together, right? But yeah, so you're gonna emulate a 90s track with those drums. Now here's where some steps you need to follow come into play. So take the drums first. Start by selecting Akai MPC from the drum machine drop-down menu on the right. It's already there, right? So you see these other ones, great ones, but you're going to use Akai MPC. I think I said Akai, and then 90s hip hop pattern B1 from the drop-down menu on the left. 90s hip hop pattern B1, right? And the reason for this, you're going to get rid of this pattern, right? Let's see, we can hear how the drums sound. Right, it doesn't really matter. You're going to change where these pads are, but the reason I chose this, number one, it has the 90s sound, the Akai MPC drums, and there's only 3 drums to play with, so you don't have to deal with any more than that. You have drum 1, which is a kick, drum 2, a hi-hat, and drum 3 is a snare. And that's what it tells you here, right? Then so you should see only 3 drum sounds available. Then you'll deselect each red pad that comes up so that you only see gray pads. Okay, so that means you're going to click on every red pad you see, and this is, right, those were red, that's just the beat that it's on. So I want no red pads, only gray. Okay. And then the track you're emulating can have more than 3 drum sounds, of course, but emulating is not the same as copying, right? The idea isn't to find a beat and try to copy it as exactly as faithfully as possible. You just want to capture something of the essence of your emulated track's drum pattern. And so let's go up here and you can mute all of these rows, right? And I'll just play around just so you get an idea. So why don't I just do this? Let's hear how this, so the play button is really important, and I'll play that. See that I click on ads and they make a sound. Now if I take them off, so the snare, if I take it off there, it's gonna go. Boom. If I take off both snares, I've just got kick. I don't really love that. Okay, this is a great example of how, for whatever reason, sometimes one of the instruments stops playing for a second. Like I'm not hearing this first kick drum, right? And so one thing you can do is reload. Just reload the screen. It'll keep everything right where it is, and then that usually fixes it. And then I would have to go mute these again, blah, blah, blah. Did I miss one? I missed one. Now I can hear that first picture, right? So that was some troubleshooting that doesn't happen all the time, but I'm glad we ran into it here. If you feel like there's an instrument or a sound that you should be hearing based on where the pad is, reloading it usually fixes that, okay? Or you might be muted and so on and so forth. Anyway, and you'll play around with the drum sounds in the way I just did and to emulate that pattern. Okay, so that's drums. Summary, I'm not sure why that's here. Sample drums, I guess that makes sense. But you'll provide a 250-word summary detailing your creative process. Why did you choose to sample specific moments? Did you have a specific moment in mind, or was there a general sound, instrument, accent, or vibe you were exploring? Or did you stumble upon something you liked by accident, which is totally fine and happens all the time in sample-based music? Why did you put sounds on specific pads, and what ways were you problem solving and problem finding with how you organized your samples and drums, right? Is there something you were looking to hear, or were you just playing things and then seeing how you responded to them? What was especially challenging about the process, whether creatively, technologically, or having to emulate drum patterns, right? The mechanics, I guess. So your summary should include some of that kind of stuff, and 250 words is, a page, double spaced. Now the guide. A tricky part about this assignment is, get out of here. The workflow. It is, like early sampling technology, often a cumbersome process, especially if you've never played or sampled music before. The most important thing you can do to help you with the logistical side of this assignment is to watch my introduction, what you're watching right now, and there will be a link to this when I'm done recording it. All right, so this is hopefully the best help you can have, and then just playing with it. But here are some reminders, tips, suggestions, and best practices to keep in mind to help you with your workflow throughout the project, and come back to this video. So before doing anything, before you even play with these drums, deselect. This is mostly about the sample part, but really you could do it with any of them. Deselect any blue pads so that they're gray. So let's start over really. Click this link. It's going to take us back to the beginning, right? So everything is how it would look when you first click on the link. So, excuse me, before doing anything, deselect any blue pads so that they're all gray, then select the first pad of sample 1 so that it's blue, then mute samples 2, 3, and 4. So deselect all the blue pads. Done. Then select the first pad of sample 1. Sample 1's here. Done. Then mute sample 2, sample 3, and sample 4. See the mute button here? Great. Okay, and by the way, we can play it. It's going to play sample 1 as it's constructed right now. Great. Oh wait, do I have? So here's another 90s hip hop pattern. I also has 3 drums. Basically, if you have 3 drums, that's all I care about. Use the track setting. Very important here. Use the track settings button to the left of the solo button. Then click on download full excerpt and keep that open and easily acceptable. And so here's mute solo. To the left of the solo button is this track settings button. Download full excerpt. Right? Yeah. That. And that's just useful to have so you can just refer to it, right? You might not even use that tab, and you can even download it from here if you want to, but keep that nearby. Maybe listen to it a few times so you get a sense of what that clip is doing. And so that's another little tip for you. Now use that track settings button to edit the sample for a given sample row by adjusting the clip start and clip duration. Right. You want to make your clip duration pretty short and play with the clip start lever. So what in the world am I talking about? Well, let's go back to this sample. So pay attention to what happens to this section. You see there's parts that are gray, then this middle part is white, and then this part is gray. This white part, the brighter segment here, is what you're hearing when in that sample. That's what the part that's sampled. So if I change the clip start, this is the clip. If I move the clip start back this way to the left, the whole segment moves, right? So just that block that moves. Now, the duration is what duration is length, right? So I can keep it more or less where it was. And if I move the duration, if I make the clip longer, then it starts in the same place, right? It still starts here, but it plays longer. Now I can move this around more and more. So take, for example, if I want the clip to start at the very beginning and the duration to be the longest possible, it's going to sound just like the clip itself. It'll sound like this. Believe that little boy was you. But that's, who cares, right? But that's often a good starting place to then start experimenting with other segments. So let me show you what I mean, because the most important 2 tips I think are coming up. If you use the solo button and hit play on the main screen, this is number 4, you can then go to the track settings window and manipulate your sample in real time. So while you're listening to it, this is extremely useful and will save you a lot of trial and error time. So let me show you what I mean here. So here's the solo button. I've got everything else muted here. Here's the solo button. Now notice what happened. All of this got muted. Everything's muted on its own. If I press play, bring up the track setting. Notice what's happening here. I'm keeping this blue pad, just the first blue pad. Right now I just want to find a sample that I like. I can move it from this first pad to whatever pad I want. But I can find the sample I like or want to use. Whether you like it or not, I guess, is up to your own taste. But I don't really like the beginning. Oh, sorry. So I want to hit play and then play around with start points and end points. What about here? I kind of like that. Okay. Oh, it stopped on me again. See, this is kind of annoying. So if you run into this, you reload it. You go solo here again. Everything else the same. You click solo, hit play, and I'm right back where I was. Kind of like that. Okay. Maybe what comes after? Oh, a little longer. That I have, right? Maybe a little too long, but let's hear how it sounds with the drums that it's already given us. So I'll unclick solo. Now I'm going to play it. It kind of feels stilted to me. It doesn't really do it for me. What if I put it right here? Maybe I'll play around, or let's start earlier. I feel like this is where I want it, but how's it going to sound here? Terrible, right? Let's move it to a downbeat here. This square. I like that. I actually do want to make it shorter. So let me solo this. Now watch what I do here. I'm going to put it back on beat 1. Hit that boy or whatever keeps doing it. Put that off. That's what I want. Stop. Unclick solo, click off that sample, and put it here where I had before. Play it with the drums. Great. I got one sample down, right? I'm happy with what that is. Now I'll just take you and sorry, I'm thinking out loud, or not thinking out loud, I'm thinking in my head. I want to show you what happens if I were to click this blue dot, or this pad, listen to what happens. So it doesn't play the first pad, it doesn't play on this pad in its completeness, in its entirety. It starts it and plays it until something interrupts it on the same line, right? And I kind of like that, actually. And look, I've already got 2 pads done for. So now what am I going to do? I'm going to go to my next sample. And I'm not going to do each one of these, but let me mute all of those. Sorry, remember, I can just solo this. Let me hear what this sample sounds like. Well, okay, that doesn't sound like anything. Let's hear what it sounds like. I'll download the full excerpt. It's the same excerpt. I didn't need to re-download that. You only need to do that once. What I want to do is, again, play with these start and clip durations, the start and the durations thing. So mute this solo. I'm just going to solo this one. And remember, while I hit play, I can change things. What about, I like this part though. But what if I just make it longer? It's kind of spooky. Much right now. What if Okay, so a couple things. It wears on you, right? So let's solo this. I think it feels too long, and I might move it, but it still feels too long. So that duration, I wanted to lengthen it a little bit, but let's cut it down some more. Let me do this. So again, I can play with this in real time. Short. Now when it comes back, let's see how that sounds. The other samples I have. Okay, is it cool? Is it grooving? Not really, not yet. But this is, and you do that and maybe I want to move it. Whoa. Whoa, what about right here? I want to make this sample 2 a little bit shorter and maybe have it at the beginning and the end. So the gears start turning, but it's helpful to play around with it for a while so you get some comfortability, some efficiency in using it, right? And again, I haven't even messed with the drums. In fact, I feel like the drums should be the kind of last thing you do, because whatever drums they preload are going to sound fine just for trying to get a basic sense of how things sound. Okay, moving on. So that's one of like the best things to get good at doing, is using that solo button. And you see, even I'm not super comfortable with it. Sometimes I forget to do it. Sometimes I have to go back, and no worries there. And this I already said. Number 5, when experimenting with your sample, use the solo button on whichever sample row you are using, and use the first pad of a row for convenience. After you have your sample trimmed how you like it, you can deselect the first pad and play around with where the sample should go, could go, whatever, within that row. That's what we just did, so it affects the rhythm and so forth. I don't know what's going on with my writing here. In other words, the first pad of the row should be blue and the rest gray while you are refining your sample, and then you can go back. Now, number 6, the sample you create for sample 1 will sound the same on every sample 1 pad. We just saw that. Listen again. Let's just solo this. Solo means that's the only thing you're going to hear when you press play. It doesn't matter if I put it on pad 1, pad 3, pad 6, it's going to be the same sample. It just comes in at a different time. And likewise for sample 2, sample 3, and sample 4. Thus, you'll only have 4 samples, right? You can put them in different places where they pop up will be different, but you're only going to create 4 different samples. A sample can and will be, however, this is right here, a sample will be cut short if it's triggered on the same row before completed. We just did that, right? I moved it to 1. Let's move it back to this pad, and you'll hear that. So the whole sample, remember, is dappity boo. I have no idea what the words are. Dappity doo. But if we play it here, right, it starts, because this one's in its way, it's going to cut off the first time it's played. So if you have a sample that lasts 8 pads worth, which is kind of what this one is, right? 1, 2, when it starts here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then it kind of repeats. More or less, right? But if you have hypothetically, a sample that is 8 pads worth of time, starting on the first pad, but select it to play again on the 5th pad, you will not hear the entire sample from the first pad. Let's just do that example. So I've got it on pad 1 and then pad 5. Basically exactly what we did, just moved up in the sequence. The entire sample This is a lot of, I don't know, this equation probably isn't necessary. Hopefully you get the idea. If a sample lasts 8 pads, if you were to have nothing in its way, then it would last 8 pads. But if a sample that would normally last 8 pads length of time is interrupted or intercepted on pad 5, then it will restart on pad 5, and so on and so forth. We could get absurd, right? This is going to sound awful, right? That kind of stutteriness. So keep that in mind. Number 7, mute all of your drums with the mute button on each row while you are deciding your sample. That's not entirely what we did. I think while you're just first trimming, you should do that. That's what we did. And then once you get deciding on where to place it, it's nice to bring in the drums to figure out where things will sound, but muting the drums will help you initially. Once you've decided on sample 1, unmute your drums and listen to how your sample meshes with them. Number 8, once you are done with one sample and move on to the next one, mute all of the other samples and the drums. So once you're happy with sample 1 and are going on to sample 2, mute sample 1, sample 3, and sample 4, and so on. This is important. Do not deselect the blue pads in sample 1 or elsewhere, because then it just gets rid of what you did, right? So if we go back to what we had, let's so when I'm figuring out where I want these things to go, I can mute pad 1. But I don't want to, I want to mute, not deselect them, because then what happens? They just go away all the time, right? I mute it. That's what I want. Able to hear it. So mute and solo, the 3 mute, solo, and track settings are your best friend, the most important tools here. Finally, like you did with sample 1, start searching for your sample 2 by selecting only the first pad of the sample 2 row and work within the track setting. And again, like sample 1, once you have settled on sample 2, you can put it wherever you want on that row and play around with that. So there's kind of a lot of redundancies that I'm going over here, but I feel like that's useful. Use that first row, the first one of each row, just for finding the sample you want, and then you move it around in places that you like it. Okay. All right. That is, I think, it. It's a lot to digest, but again, it's all mechanics. That part is just, and you've got plenty of time to work on that part, and it's fun, and you should play around with other things on Citizen DJ. It's tons of cool samples. It's all open source material, so there's no copyright on it, and that's why it doesn't sound all that good to our ears, or definitely sounds old and grainy and sometimes shrieky, but it's great for this kind of assignment and this exercise. And please let me know if you have any questions, and I can't wait to hear all of your sample-based beats. All right, take care.